Hi, I'm Patrick Siebert, and I may have just learned how to grow the craziest purple fuzz Crippy Bud I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not sure. This is Brian Fiore. He's conflicted morally just by sitting next to me. Together, we just got played, and we're coming to you live from the Cloak Blaster in Orlando, Florida. Brian Fiore is going to tell you all about a game we just got done playing called Conflict of Plants that's coming very soon to Kickstarter. Brian, tell us all about Conflict of Plants.
Okay. Conflict of Plants is a 2 to 4 player abstract strategy game, but it does have a theme of an invasive plant species. It's also got a little bit of area control and action selection as well. It takes place over about 6 rounds, which generally I would probably say took us about an hour and a half to play the game. It takes place over 6 rounds, and at the end of those 6 rounds, the player with the most victory points is the winner. So essentially, each player assumes the role of an invasive plant species, and they're basically spreading their seed out into the terrain, or the known world, if you will, and trying to score victory points in the process, and not only the victory points, but also gain other types of action tokens that will allow you to make strategic decisions as opposed to having to draw randomly to make those decisions for you. So basically what happens in the game is each player first dispenses their little seedlings into the surrounding terrain, and they draw a random token which says, okay, you can place it anywhere near where this grass icon is, if you will. Then you have to pick the best place where you want to dispense that. So each player dispenses their seedlings according to that. And then the next phase is the action phase. So again, you draw randomly, and it's a certain type of action. There's about 6 or 8 different actions that the players can take, and they're initially randomly determined. And the players can choose to either perform all of that action or none of that action. Some of the actions include things like placing an extra seedling on a board, or adding a whole new terrain, or swapping a couple or moving a couple here. Or combating your seedlings versus their seedlings and making them all die or die off in a certain terrain. After the action phase, and it goes back and forth between the players. After the action phase is the modification phase. So again, it's another random draw from the same pool, but this allows the players to then change up the terrain by placing one of those icons strategically around the board, if you will. Now, over time, what happens is all of these action tokens and the dispensement, they're all based off of a random draw. However, over time, you start to acquire actual action tokens, which instead of drawing randomly, you can use one of them and actually make a strategic decision. So over time, it grows from changes from random decisions to strategic ones. So after the modification part of the board, you then go into the scoring phase. So there's 2 types of scoring. There's minority scoring, which is any place where you either control a monopoly or you have the least number of your seedlings on a terrain. You gain victory points equal on an eligible tile if it happens to be a weed icon anywhere adjacent to it, and if the number of points is determined by how many grass tiles there are adjacent as well. The other type of scoring is not for victory points, but it's called the majority scoring, in which if you control a monopoly, or if you have the majority of the type of seedling on a terrain, then you get to pick one of those red action tokens from a pool, as long as one of those icons is represented or tangent to that tile. So that's basically how the scoring works. And then at the end of the round, there's also a balancing that takes place, because some of the terrains aren't as favorable to the invasive plant species saplings, if you will. Like desert can only hold 2 saplings on it, so if there happens to be 5 plants on there, you got to weed them out as well. So that's basically how the game kind of plays out over 6 rounds. There's a couple of other things that keep popping up. But Patrick, what would you say is your favorite thing about Conflict of Plants?
Something that you already mentioned. It's how it starts off with a lot of random choices. You still get allocated choices, but there's a lot of randomness to it in the very beginning, and then towards the middle and the end, you're starting to get more control over what you're going to do, and your strategy builds and your choices open up. I really love that aspect of it. I think it gives new players or unbalanced players a little more even footing, and gives somebody an opportunity to kind of learn the game and not feel so bad they're making bad choices in the beginning of it. If there's something that you really like about it, what is it?
I kind of like my favorite thing about the game is the random token, or actually the action selection tokens themselves, because they're very versatile. They're initially used to determine where you're going to dispense your seedlings, but then you also then turn around and use the same symbols, which are the actions themselves, where you're swapping things out, adding, deleting other people's plants and stuff. Then further, you get to use those same tokens again to modify the map, to start altering the terrain to where the best scoring tiles will be. So there's just quite you just keep recycling those same tokens, which kind of seems maybe a little confusing at first, but it's just there's a lot, it's just very versatile, and I think it's a very unique type of mechanic.
I think it becomes organic too after a few rounds. I think it really does.
It kind of grows on you after a while. Patrick, what would you say is the thing you like least about Conflict of Plants?
There's a couple little things that I'm not real happy with, but I think what I think they could have made, which was a small change, it maybe not would have been real expensive to do, but I would think they could have used a little better artwork. I think they have these silhouettes for the terrain tiles. I think they could have found even natural photographs that the copyright could have expired, and they could have found some really beautiful artwork to put on these tiles. That would have been the one little change that I think would have made, but other than that, boy, strategy-wise, this game's phenomenal. It's a really great game. And the thing that you don't like about it, what is it?
The thing that I like least about the game is probably the learning curve. It has an 18-page rule book. It's written very well, but it does take some time to read it, and it would also be a good idea to watch a playthrough video as well. But once you get up and going, it starts to flow pretty well. So
you're right. It's got a real steep learning curve, like as steep as some of the really tough games that we played that have a lot of moving parts to them. But for a game that's got that many options, that many choices, I think you're right. This is a good strategy game that's got a little bit of a curve to it.
Yeah, I think so. So again, Conflict of Plants coming to a publisher or to Kickstarter soon.
So I'm Patrick, and this is Brian, and together we just got played. Thank you very, very much for watching.
So Patrick, I don't mean to be blunt, but do you think that it's happened or by chance that the person who scores the most points happens to be the one next to the weed tiles or the weed icons and the grass icons as well?
It seemed heavy in marijuana references. It really did. I mean, I went to college, so I've smoked marijuana before, not completely unlike our former president. But yeah, I can't imagine how these guys didn't light up a big fat doobie at one point. I don't get it. I think maybe you want some of this?
No,
no, you're good.